Oh, look at all those fantastic people in the chat room today. Kevin11 is in there. Hey, thank you for the sub. J. Michael T is around. Malone is there. Monkey Bananas. And probably a bunch of other people just lurking around and not saying hello. Feel free to say hi. Finally Friday is being brought to you by VIP and Patreon members from around the world. You can show your support. You can get access to tons of bonus stuff. Well, it's all virtual stuff. Well, some of it's physical stuff. Anyway, you can get access to a bunch of stuff when you point your browser to patreon.com/major spoilers. Well, hello. Happy Friday to you. I know we had a short chat last week during Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States. It's a different location. I think there were some ups and downs. Oh, look at that. Thank you, Zimsy. Zimsy is here once again. But thank you for that support. Thank you for everyone for your support. It is a new month, and everyone is jumping in and becoming subscribers and all that stuff. Here, look, let me send you a little thanks. There you go. Look at that. All the cool people in the chat this week. But we are back in our home location, and it is the weekend once again. Time to hang out, time to kick back, time to get things started right. And I thought what we would do this week, going to turn this into a three-parter. 2 weeks ago, we talked about vertical integration and the DOJ's announcement that they were going to suggest ending the Sherman Antitrust Act lawsuit against Hollywood for vertical integration in the 1930s and 40s, which ended, essentially, the studio's ability to own their own movie theaters and the blockchain or block booking practices that went into that entire affair, which was really unfair for the small theater chains. Now, currently in the United States, if you go onto the wiki page, let me just jump over here to this wiki page. You can see all of the supposed current movie theater chains, or I guess I should just say chains in the United States, because like they list, where is Magic Johnson Theaters, for example. This merged with, this is essentially, I know it says Sony Lowe's, but I'm pretty sure like this one is owned by AMC Theaters now. Yeah, they're fully owned by AMC. So when we look at the big theater chains, or at least the 6 most popular theater chains here in the United States, we have AMC, which is by far the biggest theater chain. We have Regal Cinemas, Cinemark, Landmark, ArcLight, and of course the Alamo Drafthouse has been growing in size for the last couple of years. And of course you have a bunch of regional theater chains like Cobb Theaters down in Alabama and Florida. And so the DOJ, because of this big long list of movie theater, I'm hoping they just didn't look to Wikipedia for their answer. I'm sure in there, you know, I've linked before to their actual statement that they were posting on their DOJ website, Department of Justice website. And so you can read the full thing there, but I'm really glad it didn't start out by saying, according to Wikipedia, there are over 200 theater chains in the United States. Therefore, we think that we have no fear of monopolistic practices. Because again, as you go into closer examination on a lot of these, you can see that they're owned by these big chains. So why then, this week I thought we would talk about who benefits from this and why, after 50 plus years, 50 years, no, it's like 70 years, I think. After 70 years, why would the Department of Justice suddenly backpedal and say, hey, we don't have to worry about movie studios going out and buying movie theaters and creating a monopoly practice again? Why would they do that? I mean, could Disney go out and buy AMC theaters? Probably. I mean, that would probably be my first big choice if you're looking at the biggest movie studio wanting to buy the biggest movie chain, AMC would certainly be that. And I talked about that the last time that we were hanging out here in the Major Spoilers HQ. Hello, hello, hello. Great NATO is finally here joining us. Mark Smith has decided to jump into the chat. Hello, Mark. But to be honest, AMC, you know, we kind of ended last week's show. Somebody had posted the earnings revenue. And if somebody wants to run through some of those earnings revenues for some of those other theater chains, AMC, Regal, Cinemark, Landmark, ArcLight, and Alamo Drafthouse, business is pretty good for movie theaters right now. Of course, movie theaters have said that, hey guys, Hollywood is only producing a few big blockbusters. That's the only reason why we are making money. You guys need to do better. And of course, we've seen some recent flops. You know, Maleficent, that sequel, really didn't do well in the box office. It was only, I mean, it was here and gone so quickly, within like 2 weeks. And so there may be something to this idea that maybe studios need to crank out better pictures to get more people in the seats. So this got me down a line of thought, got me down a train of thought, got me down a rabbit hole of who benefits in this Department of Justice decision to ignore, get rid of, undo United States of America versus Paramount et al. 1948. And I think one of the things that we could look at as to why movie theaters might want to start buying, or movie studios might want to start buying movie theaters, is because if you own the theater, and with all these multi-screens, maybe you can devote more of your time to showing movies that didn't do well. So for example, if you own a multiplex 20-screen theater, and you own multiples of those, instead of rotating out movies every week or every 2 weeks, Disney owning a long chain of, if Disney were to buy a large chain of theaters, then a movie like Maleficent, which did poorly in its first 2 weeks, wouldn't be out of the theater so quickly. Disney could say, hey, we want to keep this around for 4, 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks until we start making money. And that's one of the reasons why in the 1930s, why so many B, low-budget movies were being made by Hollywood. Not only because of the block booking, but because they were forcing the theaters to buy those movies to show them with the block booking. Even those horrible movies that would have lost money, that would not have been financially viable for the studio to make, were making money. So we could look at a movie like the Maleficent movie as an example. There's a bunch of other horrible movies as well that are out right now. And those movies could stay in a theater for a longer length of time to ensure that they make their profit back. That's one possible thing. These are all speculations on my part. As we try to connect these dots. It's a good thing we don't pan over here to this side of the room, because you'd see, you know, the skeins of yarn, red yarn that I had to buy this week so I could start putting my thumbtacks and my cards and my red string all over the place, so we could follow and find out why this decision is being made and who benefits. So that's the first thing. You can keep that movie in the theater longer so that it will make up some of its money. And yeah, you could run Maleficent. You could probably, if you had a 20-screen theater, you could probably run 3 or 4 of those screens with movies that should really be down in the dollar bin, in the dollar chains, in the dollar movie theaters, and make that money up pretty quickly. So that's one thing that could happen. The other thing, of course, and probably the most obvious of why a movie studio would want to now buy a movie theater chain, is just pure profit. Right now, so this is a little bit complex, and it's not 100% accurate, but it's pretty close. When a new movie comes and hits the theater in the first week, now this is going to vary from studio to studio and from movie theater chain to movie theater chain, and it can also vary from movie to movie. But in the first week that a movie opens up in a theater, the studio gets a really large chunk of that money. Like 90% in some cases. Not all cases, but 90% in some cases. And then the second week, the movie theater, or the studio, gets 80% of those box office returns. And the fourth week, it goes down to, 70, 60, 50, etc. And that's not necessarily exactly right, but you get the idea that there's this scale that in the first week of release, movie studio gets the most amount of that box office receipt. And then over time, that goes down and the movie theater's take goes up. So there is kind of an incentive for a movie theater owner to try to keep that movie in the theater for as long as possible, providing that it can make money. So if the movie studio is getting roughly, when all is said and done, the movie studio is getting roughly 60+% of all the box office money taken, and the movie theater itself is getting like 40%. Why then? I mean, it would make sense that a movie studio might want to buy a movie theater chain so that they can keep 100% of the profit. Malone says, oh, I just saw X-Men Apocalypse and it's no worse than any recent Disney Marvel movie. It's exactly the same. Disney are already pretty draconian in their treatment of theaters and how many screens they demand and so on, says L. Wright. And I'm guessing burning Australia. Yeah, there's a rule of diminishing returns. There used to be a formula back in the 90s where you could calculate, because prior to Star Wars Phantom Menace, most movies had a run of about 10 weeks as they went from the big chains to the the cheaper theaters. And you could really calculate out over the course of 10 weeks how much money you would expect a movie to make based on its opening weekend. But then Phantom Menace came out and it really changed how much and how long and how often those movies stayed in the screen. So now it's much, much harder to predict an overall run length of that theater, or the overall run length of how long that movie is going to be in the theaters, and then ultimately how much money the studios are going to make. But roughly, the studio is going to make about 60% of all box office returns, more or less, but mostly more. If the theater cut only barely covers the running expense, then there is little benefit from owning them, except there's that 40% of that money that they ultimately don't get. So there is that, right? We get 40% more money. You could think that if Avengers Endgame made $1 billion, well, even if Disney or Marvel Studios is not getting 10% of that in the first week, over the course of the time that Marvel's Avengers Endgame was out, if they're not getting 40% of that money, why wouldn't you want to buy those theater chains so you can always guarantee that you're getting that 40% of the money, and you can extend the length of those movie theater runs if you want. In fact, if you go back a few years on the Major Spoilers podcast, we talked about this. No, actually, it was on Zach on Film. We talked about this because Steven Spielberg and I think George Lucas both came out and they were talking about how they see in the future the movie theater experience was going to change, in that a movie would be in a theater for weeks, sometimes months at a time. And that going to the theater would be kind of a big to-do, the equivalent of going to see a Broadway musical. And that ticket prices would probably be higher. Maybe you would pay $30 to go and see the new Avatar movie. And it would run in theaters for 6 months, and it would be a big kind of deal. Now, that was something Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were talking about like 4, 5, 6 years ago. And, we all kind of laughed at it and said, come on. But maybe there's something to that. And maybe that's why the theaters, not only would they want to buy a movie studio, would want to buy a movie theater, because number one, they would get 100% of that box office return, but they could force the movie to stay in the theater longer so that it could recoup costs. So now these two things are starting to line up. I live in Atlanta and it's impossible to find a movie 4 weeks after it's been released. It's crazy how fast they come and go. Great. That's a great example there, the J. Michael T. Because that brings me to the third reason why a studio might want to buy a movie theater chain. And this is the one that gets really interesting because it contradicts almost exactly the previous two. reasons that I said. And again, we're just throwing these out. We're seeing where these lines are connecting. We're looking to see what are the benefits of all of this. Why would, and if there's not going to be a problem, why would the DOJ just back off on this? But somebody is going to benefit. And we need to look at all the variables that might cause the studios to benefit. And that is, maybe the studios want to get that movie out of the theater faster, or they want to make sure that more people have access to it faster. One of the biggest things that Hollywood and the movie theater systems have been butting heads up against since, I want to say like 1989, honestly. In fact, let's take a step back for a moment. Step back to 1989. 1988, yeah, 88, 89. Movie came out, Batman 89, right? This thing was the hottest thing to hit the summer box office. People went nuts for Michael Keaton as Batman. People lined up. People were getting the bat symbol shaved into their heads, bat merchandise everywhere. This was a huge resurgence for superhero film franchises. And even today, where, people are celebrating Batman 89. This was a huge deal. People went to the theater again and again and again and again. It was in a couple of theaters the entire summer in 1989. I must have seen it in the theater maybe twice, 2 or 3 times. I was a poor farm kid. Well, country kid. I didn't live on a farm. I lived in the country. But the problem was, back in the day, in the old system, there was a window. There was a window where the movie was to be shown in theaters. Then there was a window where it was to be shown on like airplanes. Then there was a window that was supposed to be, airplanes and hotels. And then there was a window where it could go onto VHS, like almost a year later. And then there was this window opportunity for them to sell the VHS sales, and then it would go on to paid cable like HBO and Cinemax and that kind of stuff. And then finally it would be on broadcast. That's kind of how the trickle down of where your movie goes once it leaves the main movie theater. It goes to the dollar theater, and then it goes to airplanes and hotels, and then to your home box offices, and then your rental releases, and then finally everybody can have it. Then your broadcast TV. Well, with Batman 89, Warner Brothers said, you know what? We want this video in the stores in time for Christmas. We're going to jump over all of that stuff. We're not going to charge the $89 or the $100 that you normally had on a VHS tape at the time. Remember, I paid $100 so I could own my own copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they decided to sell that for the insanely low price of $19.99. And that thing sold like hotcakes. And so there is a push, a benefit to close that window, narrow that window of getting that video out, getting that movie out onto video on demand and to Blu-ray and DVD. So fast forward to today, as that window is closed and closed and closed and closed. In fact, I just got the email. I don't have it here in front of me. I just got the email this week that talked about that Maleficent movie and when it was going to be available to purchase on Blu-ray and video on demand. And it's like next month, or this month, I think. This month or next month. It's like super quick. And the theater chains hate this. Because just like you said, when you were in Atlanta, sometimes 4 weeks out, you can't see that movie anymore in the theaters, unless it's really, really popular. But the theaters want those movies to be around longer. They want to be able to have that option of having the movie in the theater longer. Look at Black Panther, for example. Black Panther, a year after it originally released, it was still showing in many theaters. A year after Black Panther was in the theater and it was out on Blu-ray and video on demand, people were still seeing it in the theaters. And so there is that demand, that backup idea, that Steven Spielberg idea that a movie like the Black Panther could stay in theaters and still be profitable is a big deal. But I also hate going to the movies lately. And I don't know if it's an anxiety that I'm experiencing or what, but I hate being around crowds. I hate being around people, and I hate going to the movie theater. Twice now, I have talked myself out of going to a movie theater to see Joker #1, and then what's the one? Oh, Knives Out. I wanted to go see Knives Out this past weekend, and I was like, no, I don't want to deal with those people. I just don't want to deal with crowds. I don't want to be out. And for those of you that have been following Major Spoilers since the beginning, J. Michael T., you know one of the very first things that I was writing about on Major Spoilers when we launched it was, I don't want to go to the theater and be around annoying people. I want to watch this movie in my home day of release or a week after release. But the studio system, as much as they want to do something like that, the theater system is like, if you do this, we will not run your movies in our theaters. We're going to hold your things to the fire and prevent you from doing this. But Disney and probably other movie studios, I'm going to use Disney a lot because they're the biggest of the big right now. I mean, we could say Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is sitting there going, man, we really want to have the success like we did back in '89 when we were able to push that Batman movie out fast and we were able to recoup all that money from people who didn't want to go see it in the theater or who wanted to see it again and again and again. Flash forward to today, Warner Brothers could be sitting there going, man, if we owned AMC, we could shut that video window down completely and we could offer people who want to go to the theater that theater experience and let them go and see this movie for $10, $20, $50, whatever that they're going to charge at the movie theater. But Steven Schleicher sitting at home who doesn't want to go to the movie theater, who has a big screen 4K display, instead of charging $10 for a movie ticket, how about he pays $25 and he's able to watch it from the comfort of his own home? He can buy it a week after everyone else sees it. Or everyone can buy it a week after they see it, if they want. But it's going to be really expensive. Kind of like comic books are now digitally. You pay full price for the comic book if you go and buy it on Comixology. But then like 6 months later, it's like 99 cents. And the reason why that is because the brick and mortars threatened the print publishers saying, if you do this, it will decimate us and we will not support you if you decide to decimate us in any way, shape, or form. And so the publishers agreed to release the comic books a day of at the same cover price for something that's nothing tangible is there, just to keep the brick and mortars happy. The reason why we don't have same day release on Apple TV for a movie that we want to see or on Netflix or wherever is because the movie theater chains have the studios and are saying, no, you can't. You need to extend that window as much as you possibly can. How would other movie houses get into the theaters owned by others? Pay to play? Now, see, that is the question where this is where the antitrust comes in, and I don't think if this were allowed that studios would completely block out. I don't think you would suddenly see, for example, Warner Brothers, if they bought AMC, they would not suddenly turn around and say, well, we're only running Warner Brothers movies at AMC theaters. That would actually be a violation, and that would bring the Sherman Antitrust Act right back into it. And so the theaters being smart, the studios being smart, would not want to do that. However, they could ensure that, let's say in a 20-screen theater, that what is 40%? 5 of the screens. They could ensure that 4 or 5 of those screens are always showing Warner Brothers movies. Right? And just like a Disney-owned theater chain, they could ensure that in a 20-screen theater, that 5 of their screens are always showing Disney movies. They could do that very easily. Let me see what other comments that we have here. Yeah, so the main reason I can think for studios to buy the cinema is to reduce competition by only showing their own stuff. And that would be the part where they wouldn't be able to do that. They really wouldn't be able to do that. Forcing a longer season doesn't always mean better thing for the studios if they are empty showings. They will prefer to get them to the streaming earlier and get the money coming back in. That's what I'm talking about here. This is the reason why I think that owning that theater chain might be in best interest, because there are people who want to go and experience a movie, but there are also people who want to get that VOD window as quick as possible. And I'm not saying that everybody, if you go into the movie theater and it's costing, I don't know what the average is right now. I'm just going to use $10 for an example. If you going to the movie theater right now costs you $10 in a ticket, but you sitting at home on a Friday night the week after the movie comes out and paying $50 to watch it at home, that might discourage a lot of people. And then, 4 months after the movies come out, then you buy it digital on demand or video on demand, your iTunes, that kind of stuff, for $19.99. Same way with the comic book form as it is right now. That would really, really work, to be honest. And I think there would be a fair amount of people who would buy into this. And then, of course, you can get the somebody like Apple working with Disney. I mean, Apple and Disney are already like this because of the Pixar purchase. You could make that exclusive on Apple devices, being able to buy that same day in theater, exclusive on Apple devices. And make that your box, make that your exclusive black box to get those windows to Hollywood. So that VOD window, I think, is the thing that we really probably ought to look at very, very closely. And that might be the biggest reason why. Now, granted, I think the theater chains want it to be like a 90-day window. So essentially 3 months after the movie is out of theaters. Then 90 days later, you can buy it on Blu-ray or DVD or video on demand. I think even if the movie theaters owned it and they knocked it down to a 30-day window, that would be in the benefit of the movie studios. Because if you're saying, like J. Michael T. was saying, 4 weeks after he wants to go see the movie, or 4 weeks after the movie comes out, he can't find it in any theaters, then what's the point of having that extended window that goes 2 more months? Let's have it in the theater for a month, and then after a month, then you can get it on Blu-ray, then you can get it on VOD. And because the studios own now movie theater chains, they can start doing this. And here's the thing, this is the weird thing about this. While it would be illegal for somebody like Warner Brothers to say, hey, we're buying all of the landmark theaters in the nation, or the Cinemark theaters in the nation, and we're only going to show Warner Brothers movies in there. What could happen is that Warner Brothers buys all of the landmark cinemas in the United States, and then now because they have a voting say at the Theater Owners Association, they can say, no, we're going to switch this to, and Sony over there and Disney over there, we've all decided to move that window to a 30-day window instead of a 90-day window. And all the rest of you small theaters like Cobb Theaters and the other small ones that are on that list, you can go ahead and still demand 90 days, but now we're in control of that VOD window. And I see that as something that would be really a reason to buy the theaters. So there's 3 ways. First of all, we've got the box office exclusivity, or extension of the box office. We've got the pure profit. 100% of all the money that comes stays inside the Disney Corporation or the Warner Corporation or the Sony Corporation or whatever it is. That VOD window is shrinking. Yeah, maybe it would be. But would you want to go? So the great question for the Great NATO is, or no, who's asking the question? Yeah, the Great NATO says, no, it's J. Michael T. is saying, it cost me close to $140 to go see the latest MCU movie. My guess is because you're taking family. $40 would be a steal for me. But that latest MCU movie, the Avengers Endgame, the movie that everyone is going to talk about, the Mandalorian that everybody is going to want to talk about, are you willing to wait a month to go and see that movie? Or are you still going to end up paying the $140 to go see it once in the theater? Disney now has 100%. Marvel Studios has 100% of your $140. And then in 30 days, because you enjoyed that so much, you plop down another $40 to watch that movie again. And they've got your money faster. And so, Malonis, to be honest, I'm not sure if I'd really want to pay something for a new run in the MCU movies. Fatigue is real. I understand that. But just think about anything. Everyone's talking about the new Mulan movie. Everyone's talking about the new Black Widow movie. Maybe it's something that you don't want to see right away, but you kind of want to see it. Or maybe it's something like The Joker, where initial weekend release was probably not as strong as it could have been because people were afraid to go to the theaters for whatever reason, or didn't want to support the movie for whatever reason. But, the second, third, and fourth weeks, the box office on that started to rise. So maybe a month later, you're like, you know what, I could wait a month to go and see this and still have the conversation with everybody. So that 30-day window is going to get closer and closer and closer. And that's the reason why people pay. Yeah, because you want to see it right then and there. And that brings me to my final reason why a movie studio might want to buy a theater chain and why the DOJ is easing up on their recommendations of doing away with that court case and those restrictions. And it has to do with the Oscars. Right now, the big talk is is it The Italian? Is that the name of the movie? The Martin Scorsese movie? The movie that looks at the history of the Teamsters and Jimmy Hoffa and some of the people involved in his life. I think it's the Italian, isn't that what it is? Oh, the Irish, that's what it is. The Irish, sorry. Thanks for that. The MCE says the Irish, so thank you for that. The thing is, it's a Martin Scorsese movie. It's getting a lot of rave reviews. However, the big studios are sitting there with their noses up in the air saying, well, we don't want to consider a movie that is released originally on Netflix as something that is Oscar-worthy because it's not in a movie theater. And so that forced, with the Irish, that did force, and with a couple other movies that Netflix has released, a couple of their other original movies, has forced them to go and find small movie theater chains that they could run their movie in for, what was the Irish in the theater? I think it was like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 week run in the theater. And there was actually a qualified window for the Oscars for how long that movie had to be in the theaters in order to be considered for an Oscar. And so that was a lot of headache for Netflix to try and go and find a theater chain that would be willing to cooperate, that wouldn't piss off the other studios, so that they could get their movie in there and get it qualified for the Oscars. But Netflix, which is its own movie studio, what if they went out and bought their own small theater chain? There's some small ones out there. They would have no problem running their own movies anytime they wanted in those theaters. And the other studios wouldn't be able to do anything about it because they made it into the theaters for the set rate of time. So therefore it could qualify for the Oscars. So while we've been talking about Disney, while we've been talking about Warner Brothers, maybe who we should really be looking at, if I'm looking at all my silly string on the wall, maybe we really should be looking at Netflix. Maybe Netflix is the one behind this. Maybe Netflix is the one who's been going around quietly lobbying with the DOJ to get them to change their mind about this so that Netflix can go out and buy a movie theater chain to not only get money from the studios that they're fighting against, it seems like all the time, but also to ensure that there is no question about getting their movies into Oscar award selections and categories. I think that's the one that we really need to be looking at, even though I've given you 3 other good reasons why the movie theaters might, or the movie studios might want to buy movie theaters today. It's that 4th one that really has me going, that is just devious enough for Netflix to do. And I'm not saying that Netflix is an evil organization. They're a business organization, and their business is to create content that people will want to buy and people will want to go see. And certainly if you were lucky enough to go see The Irish in the movie theater, you probably had an experience. But I don't think Netflix is going to go out and buy AMC. I don't think Netflix is going to go out and buy Regal Cinema or Cinemark or Landmark. But Netflix could buy 2 other theater chains on the list that are pretty specialized theaters. Netflix could go out and buy the ArcLight. Netflix could go out and buy the Alamo Drafthouse chain. And the Alamo Drafthouse, so this is the thing, who would buy which studios? I'm sure Disney would love to buy AMC, but that might be tied up in the courts because AMC is really pretty large. But some of these smaller theater chains, that's who you should be looking at over the next couple of months. That's why I was saying if anybody wanted to drop some links into recent revenues for some of these theaters, we could find out which ones are the most profitable, and those would be the ones that the studios are going to be looking at. Once this goes away, I think there's like a 90-day grace period after the recommendation has been made for public hearings on this DOJ recommendation. And then after 90 days, if nothing comes of it, then they'll look at it and say, yeah, we can go ahead and lift this. So 3 months from now, so we're looking at March, April, May, looking into May, look and see what the quarterly earnings are from the theater chains, and then start looking and listening, keep your ears to the ground and see, is there any talk of a movie theater chain wanting to sell? Is there any talk of a movie studio wanting to buy a theater chain? Oh, that might be interesting. So I've given my predictions on this, right? I think they're all fairly valid. I don't think any one of these can just be outright dismissed, because I think they're all really, really valid. Next week, I think we're going to hit part 3 of this, because at some point we need to talk about what happens to you, the consumer, when all of this happens. But I think next week I want to circle back around to Disney once again. And I want to talk about Jojo Rabbit. and the problems that Disney has had with a Hitler movie. And I'm not saying that they've actually had physical problems, that there have been actual boycotts or anything about a Hitler movie released by Disney. But internally, I've heard rumors, I've heard talk, I've heard speculation, I've heard reports that Disney didn't know what to do with Jojo Rabbit. I'm going to talk about that next week. I hope this was a good conversation for all of you. We went a little bit long today, but that's okay. We've got the time. I think it would be weird for their brand of Netflix to go physical. I don't know if that would be, because remember, Netflix started out in the physical media movement. They started out by doing DVDs and renting DVDs to you through the mail. And when they announced that they were going directly to digital only and they were getting rid of their DVD stuff, people thought they were nuts. And it turned around and made them $1 billion over the next 4 years after they switched completely to streaming services. So much so that they went from the business of distributing movies to the business of making movies. So it would make sense that they are back into the business of now distributing and showing movies once again. And for those Oscar reasons, which does equal lots and lots of big money, which means lots and lots of more people will want to subscribe to their service because, hey, this Oscar-worthy film from Martin Scorsese is now available on Netflix that you can watch it or go to the theater and watch it. I think that's a big pull for them. So that's where we're going to wrap it up. Next week, I want to talk about Disney and Jojo Rabbit and some of the problems that, again, if Disney would only look back into their own history, they could figure out all their problems themselves. But I hope you've learned something. I hope that you have had some food for thought this week. I hope that you've, something to put into your head. Maybe you're screaming at your screen going, oh man, you're just a conspiracy nut. Where's your tinfoil? Need to make a hat for next week, Steven. That's fine too. But I have yet to see any other reasons presented. And really, I don't think people are paying much attention to this. I think I've only seen like 1 or 2 reports hit like Variety, and it was not even a front page story. I have seen nobody talk about this. Because maybe they won't do anything about it, but man, in 90 days or in 6 months, when suddenly a movie theater it says that they're going to be bought up by a studio, and people are like, well, where did this happen? You're going to know that we talked about it here first, and you're going to have all the information. You're going to have your own thoughts and speculations on this. We're going to continue this conversation next week on Finally Friday. But thank you, everybody, for sitting down and joining us. Awesome conversation today. Thank you so much, Kevin11. Great discussion, says the J. Michael T. Thank you so much. Oh, Kevin11 is also very nice. Look up there, everybody. Right there. Patreon.com/Major Spoilers. If you enjoy these conversations, if you enjoy the things that we do, you can help keep this channel on our Twitch stream going. You can help keep our YouTube channel going. You can help keep our website going. You can help all of our podcasts continue by pointing your browser to patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Just look and see what we're doing. If you think Finally Friday is worth $1 an episode, and that's just this show, we do like 8 other podcasts. If you think this show is worth $1 an episode, $5 a month, I'd certainly appreciate if you would sign up at that level. Go into 2020 with a big smile on your face as you get access to bonus content and stuff that you'll only find on our Patreon page. And I certainly appreciate all of you who are currently patrons. I certainly appreciate all of you, as Kevin11 is pointing out, using your Amazon Prime subscriptions to keep this channel going as well. That money's coming right out of Jeff Bezos' pocket. It's not even coming out of your pocket. Ooh, we didn't even talk about Amazon in this deal, did we? Patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time. We'll be back next week for more conversations, or more discussions, or more thoughts. But until then, have a good weekend. Do good, be good, and we will talk with you again real soon. Oh, gold, baby, gold. Look at them people. Carmelo and Charles and Christopher and Daniel. David. James T. Kenneth and Kevin and KVII. I think that's Roman numerals for 1,000,001. Quinn and Sarah. Texura is there. Wow. That guy. There's Kimberly and Ron. I like Alan and Alex. They're both good. Brian's one of my favorites as well. Dan and Darren and Daryl and Devin and Diana. You see your names fly by? I need my little mirror so I can do my little show intro. Carl! Ken and Kenny and Kirby. Ah, Zoe, thanks for showing up. Pleasant Doom, thank you for showing up in the show this week. L. Wright in Australia, thanks. Watson and Will Y and everybody else. Talk to you later.